Oh, hey there. You caught me at the right time. My table saw is looking a little worse for the wear. Dusty, uncalibrated, and it's just not cutting it anymore. So today, I'm going to show you how to breathe new life into your saw and make it cut like a dream. Let's get your table saw running at its best with some simple, easy to follow tune-up tips. I'm Travis, and this is how I do things. Before we dive in, let's take a quick moment to talk about the basics. A well-maintained table saw is like a good cup of coffee. It's essential for getting things done. But like a coffee pot, it needs some love and care. If you're not tuning it up regularly, you're leaving performance, safety, and deliciousness on the table. So grab your tools and maybe a fresh cup of coffee and let's get to work. You probably noticed I'm working on my DeWalt DWE7491RS table saw. But most of these tips will work with any table saw, so stick around. First things first, let's clean this beast. No matter how good your saw is, if it's covered in dust, wood, chips, and sawdust, it won't perform at its peak. Start by unplugging it. Safety first, right? Then grab a brush, air compressor, or even a shop vac if you want. Seriously, you wouldn't believe how much gunk can build up in these things. This is your saw's spring cleaning. Getting all the nooks and crannies, especially around the motor, blade, and table surface. The cleaner it is, the happier your saw will be. I'm going to take the blade out so I can clean inside of here. While you're inside of here, make sure your dust collection port isn't clogged. I'm mostly just getting all the dust off and then wiping it down with some WD-40. It does a decent job cleaning and protecting the surfaces. Then once it's all nice and clean, I'll wipe the top surfaces with some paste wax to protect them a little more and make them nice and slippery. Now that our saw is sparkling clean, let's take a look at the blade. If your blade isn't cutting like it used to, it might not be dull, it might just need to be cleaned. So always try to clean it first before you replace it. To clean the blade, I place it on top of a 5-gallon bucket lid and spray on a cleaner that is designed specifically for this. I put a link to this cleaner down below. Spray it on and let it sit for a few minutes and then start scrubbing with a brush. If the buildup is a little more stubborn, you might need to use a fine Scotch-Brite pad. Get all the surfaces clean. This is also a great time to inspect the blade for dull or damaged teeth. If needed, have the blade sharpened or replace it. Now I'm going to reinstall the blade so we can talk about blade alignment. A misaligned blade will cause your cuts to wander, giving you rough and uneven edges, which nobody wants. And if your blade is way off, it could burn or even cause kickback, which is very dangerous. To check blade alignment, grab your trusty tape measure. Then measure the distance to the miter slot at the front and the back of the blade. If it's not even, it's time to adjust the blade. Most saws let you adjust the blade by loosening a couple of bolts, then gently nudging the motor assembly until it's perfectly parallel with the miter slot. Next, I'll check to make sure that my bevel stops are set to 0 and 45 degrees. For that, I'll use my magnetic digital angle finder. You just zero it out on the table and then put it on the blade. The DeWalt has adjustment screws with a cam to adjust the stops. The blade is looking good, but we can't forget about the riving knife. The riving knife is meant to reduce the chance of kickback by keeping the workpiece aligned with the blade. But if it's not aligned with the blade, the workpiece gets hung up on it. On my DeWalt table saw, you adjust the riving knife by removing the throat plate and moving the blade into the full up position. Then lay a straight edge against two blade tips. The riving knife shouldn't touch the straight edge. If it does, loosen the two lock screws and adjust with the set screws. When you like the position, you can retighten the lock screws. Hopefully your riving knife was already perfectly straight, because between that sharp blade and the small space to work with and not knowing which way to turn set screws, that was not a pleasant process. A perfectly aligned blade will give you smooth, straight cuts with zero frustration. Okay, now let's talk about the fence. The fence is your best friend when it comes to accuracy, and if it's out of whack, your cuts will be all over the place. A warped or loose fence can give you crooked cuts, and nobody wants that. To check the fence, use your square. Place it on the table against the fence. Make sure the angle is 90 degrees. If it's off, adjust it. Some saws have screws to fine-tune the fence position, but if it's bent or damaged, you might need to replace it. In that case, it's better to just swap it out than fight with it. If you do find a warp fence on your DeWalt DWE7491 table saw, don't replace it with the factory one. Replace it with this upgraded TSO fence. It's super high quality, made in America, and has these 3 T-slots to add accessories. I put a link down below. Once you're sure your fence is in good shape, check to see that the fence is square to the table. This is a known issue with the DeWalt DWE7491RS table saw. Mine was off slightly, but I was able to get it squared up by adding a washer right here to space out the bottom. Now it's good to go. The other thing you want to check is that the fence is parallel to the blade. Just use a tape measure to check at the front and the back of the blade. If the measurement isn't the same, you can fix that by loosening these screws, adjusting the fence, and then retightening the screws. The DeWalt has 3 fence positions, so you want to check all those positions and adjust as necessary. Here's a tip not everyone thinks about: lubrication. You don't want your table saw's parts squeaking and grinding like an old door hinge. A little bit of lubrication can go a long way in making sure everything runs smoothly. Look at all these moving parts. Everything from the blade tilt to the height adjustment. Just a light coating of lubricant on the rails, pivot points, and the gears can make your saw feel like it just rolled off the factory floor. On a side note, my DeWalt table saw used to have an issue where the blade would lower itself with vibrations. I was able to fix that by tightening this nut for the depth of cut adjustment. Now that we've got this thing all dialed in, it's time for the fun part, the test cut. Take a scrap piece of wood and run it through the saw. Keep an eye out for any unusual sounds, vibrations, or kickback. This is also a good time to adjust the rip scale pointer. After you make the test cut, just measure the piece you cut off and then set the rip scale pointer to that dimension. Smooth, clean, and accurate cuts. That's what we're after. A well-tuned table saw isn't just about performance, it's about safety too. If everything's running right, you're going to have fewer accidents and more precise cuts. And who doesn't want that? And there you have it. Your table saw is now tuned up and ready to rock. Remember, a little maintenance goes a long way. Regular cleaning, alignment checks, lubrication, and blade care will keep your saw cutting like a champ for years to come. So, what are you waiting for? Get out there and make some cuts. Just make sure to wear your safety gear. Thank you so much for watching my entire video. If you liked it, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Hopefully I'll see you on my next video, but in the meantime, enjoy those perfect cuts.